ask you, which is, my name is Sean Frame, by the way, as Cindy said. I live in Placerville. I'm on the Placerville Union School District School Board, which she also didn't mention is I'm running for Congress in our district in 2020. So if you're interested in finding out more about my campaign, let me know. I've got a little sign up. You can just give me your email address, phone number, whatever, and I'll keep you up to date on what I'm doing with my campaign. I come out here free and moderate these events and provide my AV because I believe in what you're doing here. When Mike and Cindy came to me and told me about what was happening out here in GDPUD and what your experiences are in this community, I couldn't walk away from that. In fact, I said, let me figure out how I can help you in any way I can. And right now it's moderating these events. What you're doing, by the way, and what's happening already because of the efforts of people in this room and Mike and Cindy and other people in this community is what America is founded on, right? When you have a government agency and it's not doing the right things, you stand up and you change it. So I just want to say I'm proud of everybody in this room and Mike and Cindy for what they're doing here. It's amazing. As we go through the day, you are welcome to speak anytime you want. So if you hear something and you say, I don't know what they're saying, or I want a clarification on that, or I have something to add to that, just raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone. You don't have to come up. The reason we have the microphone is so that everybody in the room can hear. Not all of us have great hearing in our advanced years. So the microphone helps with that. It also helps for the viewers at home who will be experiencing this via the video. So just raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone. And I'll leave it to Mike and Cindy to get things started.
You want to say the pledge first?
Yep. Yeah, say the Pledge of Allegiance. Will you stand, please? Hand over heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
See, nobody took a knee.
Sports fan.
Tomorrow.
I think you may have to turn on the power. I think it's just a little switch on the side there.
Just for anybody that's sharing the town hall events, it's better to share it from the actual event than
There you go.
anything that's posted, because sometimes it's in between getting changed. So I know the one that went out had Marshall Grange on the top and the Georgetown, Iowa at the bottom. But the actual event was changed. So share the event, and that one's easier to go through.
Right. And before we get started, what I want to do is I brought a number of handouts for you all today to share. They're on the side table. Some of these were passed out at Tuesday's board meeting, so you may notice that they all say received and stamped with a date on them. They're very important. We'd like you to take a look at those. Read those at your leisure. If you have any questions or concerns on them, please ask. But they are telling. One of them is a list of 7 anomalies that were noticed by a person in the community with the rate study data. Based on a comment that was made at the Friday Finance Committee, one of the committee members asked the community, we'll go out and calculate what it is you think we need to know, we need to see. And we had a community member do that, and she provided the handout that looks like a spreadsheet. And she took the numbers actually from the rate study and put in here based on the usages and the bi-monthly charges for the rates that we were going to be charged. And she determined that according to the rate study, there should have been about $3 million in rate increases, but yet according to the budget that was also in the rate study, it said that their budget, they wanted it to be $335,000. So, or excuse me, $3,335,000. So that's $335,000 more than they really needed to collect based on the data they put in their own rate study. So that's a telltale sign that the rate study itself is showing in and of itself that the rates are too high. So that's that one. I brought some Xerox copies, printouts from the audits, previous audits that show capital assets, what the capital assets have been going back a couple of years in those audits, and they're far lower than the capital assets in the capital replacement program that's in the rate study. So again, just leads to the fact that we really need to look at that capital replacement program and its bloated or inflated numbers. couple of handouts are from the audits, where they are showing a average depreciation of close to $700,000 that our general manager is not choosing for whatever reason to show in his budget. Shows up in the audit, but about $700,000 plus its interest doesn't show up in his budget. Okay?
Cindy, something that I brought up at the board meeting and also at the financial committee meeting is that on page 15 of the rate study at the bottom under alternate, it makes a statement that if any grants or other monies come into the district, that would trigger the need for the district to do another rate study. We have gotten, to my knowledge, at least $700,000 in grant money that the district has known about that they were going to receive over 2 years ago, and yet it states specifically in black and white, bottom of the page of 15, that the district is supposed to be doing another rate study when they have received additional monies. They have not done this, and that would affect the amount of money that they collect from the ratepayers.
Great, thank you. Got questions, comments noted. Thank you, Steve. Another one of the handouts is the questions that we just recently received, answers to our questions from the previous town hall meeting from the general manager. I haven't even had a chance to look at them. I noticed that they dropped in this morning, and so I just printed them out and brought them, so those are there. Last one I want to point out is Sheree Carlin did an excellent job going through many records to show, financial records, to show that there's 48 accounts that are over budget. And there have not been the complimentary resolutions before the board to expend those additional monies on those accounts. So there's no authorization from the board given to the general manager to spend the money outside the budget on those accounts, and there's 48 of them that are over budget. One of the over budgets she shows here in the handout with a lot of the columns on it is the overcharges for the legal fees that we've been paying, and it actually shows that he was over budget in middle of March, well before, so he could have had plenty of time to even come before previous board to say, we need some rate adjustment, or excuse me, not rate adjustment, we need some budget adjustments, financial adjustments, to spend a little bit more money to cover accounts that we're going over budget on, and that has not yet been done. So, beginning a lot of transparency again with the efforts from the town hall meetings with the answers to the questions, and a lot of the work that community members are doing to bring forward, to peel back the layers, to begin to have the district become a more accountable, more transparent. So that's the handouts. Again, take a look at them at your leisure. Any questions, let us know.
Cindy and Mike. Also, I quickly looked at his answers. Steve Palmer, the general manager. I would request that when the general manager mentions an item or a document or any kind of wording that he uses, that he substantiate it as they do in a legal paper, stating where that document is, the name of it, the time and date, and everything else, because I have found that, in my opinion, that our general manager is part and parcel of the problems that we have now, not only in the rate study, but before that.
Great, okay, thank you, Steve. So noted. Did you want to go over the agenda?
Well, it's all, you can go with the,
What's that?
our water matters part, that's on Sean. So we'll go over the agenda.
Oh, okay, great. I don't have the actual agenda sitting in front of me, so I'll just go through it as you go.
Yeah.
Do you need me to, you're gonna run the slideshow, right? Okay. So our agenda for today, because our water matters, because our community matters. So board resolutions and updates, video on the Walton treatment plant, the rate freeze and where do we go from here, and then community Q&A and input.
All right, so the board resolutions from the last board meeting, and it also tied in with the finance committee meeting met before to go over the rate freeze, and basically the general manager had a presentation on basically why we shouldn't freeze. And the finance committee, at that time, they voted 2-1 to not freeze the rates. The chair at the time said we didn't have enough information, and we probably shouldn't vote yet, but the other two wanted to vote. So they put a lot of stuff in the consent calendar, and we ended up having to pull all of the items. One was resolution of the minutes. For some reason, they thought the president was nominated at 5-0 unanimously, and that was not the case. We had nominated myself for president, and it was 3-2. 2 votes were for me and 3 for Dane. So, and then all the stuff Cindy had to pull to change in the minutes. So the minutes still need to be resolved.
And, you know, we want to make sure that there's a fine line between oversight that the board does on the district and micromanaging. Mike and I don't want to be micromanagers, but we want to be transparent enough and bring up enough concerns that we have for things that are inaccurate, like the meeting minutes. There were many errors in them. We're not going to let that go by. We want an accurate record. We want transparency and accountability done to the benefit of everybody in the community. So we stopped and had them pointed out every one of the problems and concerns that we have and asked them to go back and correct them. Now that might sound like micromanaging and nitpicking.
It's not. No.
But until we get to the point where they are accountable and they are transparent, we don't feel that we have to do this, and we're all comfortable, we're going to continue to keep asking questions, and we want you to continue to ask questions of us, so that if we're not asking the right questions, you let us know, we'll make sure we ask the right questions.
And that one was specific because beforehand we asked what the role of the president and vice president would be, and they were said in terms of setting up the agenda. And that was why before the vote I made quite clear that one of the 2 positions should be one from the previous board and one from the new members that were just elected, to make sure there's a continuation between the board members and the new members coming in. So there's both points of view on, and as you can see how those 2 votes went. I was nominated the first one, and it went 3-2 Dane, then nominated for the second one, and went 3-2 to Dave. So they ignored what we said at that point. So that was why it needed to be reflected in the minutes as well.
And I'll just make a point as somebody who sits on another board. High-functioning boards generally don't have only the president and vice president adding items to the agenda. It's generally open to the entire membership of the board. It's very rare that a board is only where the board agenda is controlled by 2 members. So these seem like, you know, esoteric parliamentary things, but they're very important to openness and transparency in government.
And that was what we heard before. And actually what it is, it's actually just the president and general manager control the agenda. So it's even more restrictive.
And one more aside on that is that the general manager serves at the pleasure of the board, not the other way around. He is hired, he is their one employee, and therefore serves at their pleasure. So I think it should be noted by members of the public and by the board themselves that they tell him what to do, not vice versa.
What about during a finance committee meeting? What's the manager's role? Who serves who at a financial committee meeting?
So currently the resolution says that the finance committee is under the direction of the general manager. And that's why we've been trying to bring the finance committee resolution up, so we can change that, because it should be under the direction of the board, not the general manager.
Correct. My point in bringing the finance committee topic to upcoming agenda would be so that we can talk about roles and responsibilities of committee members, functionality of that committee, and volunteerism. I mean, you all know that I volunteered to be on the finance committee, but yet I was due to be fired from the finance committee. So what are the rules to be on, and what are the rules to be taken off? And when Mike resigned because he needed to, because now he holds a seat on the board, there was really no procedure for that either. So we really do need to kind of fine-tune our policy when it comes to the finance committee. And so we really do need to have that topic put on the future agenda. Now more than ever, we have directed the Finance Committee to assist the general manager, go back and do a specific task. They can't do that if they have 3 or 4 vacancies. So, and we've got applications in to fill those vacancies. So it's very important that we get that item on the agenda, that we talk about it, get those seats filled, to get moving so that they can assist the general manager on his directive.
Question, what do you think of Dave Halpin's comment that the board serves the district, not the community?
Yeah.
I think we all have our personal opinions. My personal opinion is, I work for you. You voted me in this office, I work for you. The voters are at the top of that org chart. Then comes the general manager,
The board.
then the board, then the general manager,
The
thank you.
finance committee and legal is over the board, then the general manager, so.
Right,
He's still got a lot of slots.
So
Yes.
when Dave made that comment at the last meeting, was he incorrect, or is that what he thinks is the way it goes?
Well, that's his opinion.
that's his opinion.
But what, is there a legal statement about it?
Well,
It's
if
called
any
an
of-
election.
if any of you, yeah, pretty much it's the election, and if any of you go to, the CSDA workshop, which is gonna be held, when is that? The end of the month. Our consultant, so one of the principals from our consultant firm, when he speaks about the fiscal responsibility that board members has to the district, he talks of the 2 fiscal responsibilities. One is to the district to make sure that you're keeping it afloat, and the other is you're supposed to follow the will of the community. So those are the 2 fiscal responsibilities, so.
Yeah, that's what you stated. And just before you stated that, Dane at that board meeting, he was stressing that, and stating that, yes, we're elected by the district, but once we're on the board, that it's their way or the highway is basically what he was getting down to. It's his way. What they want is what they're gonna do. They're not gonna listen to us anymore.
And just by following elected process, you can go that way. But the other thing they have to remember is a significant portion of our revenue, which is the ad valorem, is taxpayer money. It's not just customer rates, it comes from taxpayer. And you have to represent your taxpayers, and that was the whole basis of the formation of paying taxes without representation, so.
Correct, and that's why I stated it's voters, not just customers, that are at the top of the org chart.
You could be a customer and not be a voter, and not be able to vote in the directors. And so you have to be a voter to be in charge.
And Cindy, I believe that you misstated, you were not fired, you resigned just in the nick of
She was
time.
going,
Yeah, correct, thank you. I resigned just so I saved myself the public humiliation
Wasn't
of
that-
being fired and
Yeah.
humiliated and get my character
Yeah.
assassinated
That
for
was
something I
great.
felt I was doing correctly.
Took the wind out of the president's sails.
yeah.
Correct. And I still plan on going to finance committee meetings and being involved as much as I can as a board member to oversee all the finances, because I do care about transparency and accountability. And I've got the experience to help them if they would view me as an asset rather than a liability.
Can I ask about that? The finance committee, there are 2 people on there who are nowhere near as educated as you are and experienced. They're allowed to stay on. There's somebody who's never there who's allowed to stay on. Yet you come in with all your experience and knowledge and questions, and you get removed. How can that be?
Well, it's another reason why we need to get that finance committee topic on a future agenda to talk about it, so that now that we sit in different positions, we're not committee members anymore, we're board directors. We have a little bit more, hopefully, input and persuasion on the other board members to discuss openly the features of a committee and how we want that committee to function, what its purpose will be, and maybe we can update that resolution and put the correct direction on the finance committee back where it belongs, and that's at the discretion of the board, so that we can direct the finance committee to assist the general manager and give the finance committee direct projects to work on, like reviewing the audit, reviewing the budget, reviewing any financial statements. There's a lot of work the finance committee could be doing, because we still are pulling consent items from the a calendar to talk just about check descriptions. So there's a lot of, I think, benefit that the finance committee members could have if we get those vacancies filled with some capable committee members. And I think we've got 3 really good applications in-house right now. We're working with a young lady who is graduating with a BA in accounting who's interested in helping. Her parents live up here, and she's interested in coming back to help, so she wants to be a CPA. She's gonna go on for further training. She would be another asset on our finance committee. So I think we need to get that topic on the agenda so we can open it up for discussion and make some changes in the positive direction.
Let me just answer for Carolyn. Currently, the resolution states that the finance committee members serve at the will of the board, so the board can remove members without cause. But in order for them to have removed her, that would have been an agenda item, which it was, and then they would have had to vote her off.
On that, right there, you know, the finance committee is there to be advising the board with what they have studied and learned. And, you know, the board don't like what they come up with, and then they're summarily.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Or summarily removed because the board member or members do not like what they're being presented with. That should not be. You know, I mean, when you say at the will and discretion, you know, bad behavior I can see, you know, but bringing me my information that I'm asking you to bring, and I don't like it, you're fired. You know, that's nonsense, and I think that should be addressed, at least is to some fashion.
Yes, I agree.
Well,
I agree, we need to update
the
that.
person that did bring up the removal is
I have
no
one more.
longer on the board.
He has one more.
One more. Here I come. There you go.
I love these things.
Okay.
Yeah, about transparency and about, you know, is this the kind of relationship that you guys going to enjoy? I'm reading here question 8, where you've asked the general manager to ask Dave Souza about the irrigation water, et cetera, and his answer is, you know, the proper action is for community members to raise this issue. And aren't you bringing it to his attention for the community members?
So basically what we do is all the questions that you bring up in the town hall or that are emailed to us, we send to the general manager. But we also contacted Dave Souza about that one specifically. But he answers all the questions, so he just answered, well, I can't answer for this one, so you should bring it up to Dave Souza. But
Correct, and it was brought up, David, was brought up at the board meeting on Tuesday by a community member directly to Dave. So hopefully Dave Souza will come back with an answer for us once he checks into it.
Yeah, okay, so then the general manager didn't know.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Because, I mean,
yeah,
you know,
he's
that's
getting all the
no
questions,
answer.
yep.
That's almost a slap in the face.
Now,
Yeah, don't ask me that question.
Ideally, what he should have done was sent that question to Dave Souza and said, hey, this is what came from the community. But
And then CC'd us so he know that, he would let us know that he's following through. That's what we'd hope to happen, but he may not have done that because it was asked directly from a community member to Dave during the most recent board meeting. So hopefully we will hear back from Dave Souza very soon. I'm sure we will. The other thing is, we've set this feedback loop up, Dave, for your information. We've set this feedback loop up with the general manager. So we have a town hall. Anytime there's a comment or question, I'm writing it down. I type them all up. I send them to the general manager as quickly as I can get them to him. He addresses them as quickly as he can to get us back these answers before our next town hall meeting. This town hall meeting, he actually did these rather quickly for us because it was slated for next weekend. But they have a concert here at the Grange next Saturday, so they moved this up a week, which kind of cut the time short for the general manager. So I'm glad that he did a good job in getting us answers. But with this particular answer, we will definitely follow through with Dave Souza, and we'll
Because
get
at the
that back.
end of the day, the general manager works at the will and discretion of us.
Yes.
And also, you can send a question to Saunders at Town Hall. What is it? Saunders at Town Hall at Gmail.
I know, we always have to look.
Yeah.
It's on.
It's Saunders Town Hall at gmail.com, Garcia Town Hall at gmail.com. And if anyone on Facebook, it's Divide Hall Information. You could put questions there. And we also put the answers when they come in, they'll be on there as well.
Correct, and we need you to use those particular email addresses because even though we're sitting on the board, these town halls are not representative of the board or the district. We have to keep them independent, and that was at the request of the general manager, and we agreed. So technically, we're here as community members and concerned members, but we're also directors. But we want to get you this information, we want the feedback back, but technically you're not representing the district sitting up here. I know, figure that one out, yeah. So email us.
I get it completely.
Yeah, okay, so just email us at those emails rather than using our board of directors emails.
Which I would thank you as a community member to another community member for bringing these things to us and being able to take them back to them.
Right, right. We definitely need that communication feedback loop. If it only comes to us and it doesn't go any further, we can't get your answers, we're not doing you any good.
I'm not sure if everyone knows about this information, but how does a resolution get changed?
It will have to be, Chris, on the agenda, so any topic for discussion needs to be on an agenda. Has to be agendized so that you know about it, we know about it, you have time to prepare for a discussion, and so do we. Then we come to the meeting, we talk about that item on the agenda, and the board will listen to the board directors, and then they'll listen to the community, then there will be a discussion, there could be a motion made, and then that would be, possibly the motion would be directing a change. And then they take a vote, and if it's voted yay versus all the nays, then the changes would be made, whatever that motion was.
And one thing you should know too, as community members, and this always frustrates community members when they show up at a meeting, if an item is not on the agenda, you as community members can bring it up.
Okay.
But they cannot talk to you about an item that's not on the agenda because it's not fair to those who weren't able to attend the meeting to not know that that conversation would happen in advance. That's why the law exists. They're not trying to shut down conversation, but public meeting laws require that people know in advance of the meeting what will be discussed so that conversations don't happen, things don't happen, and people are like, wait, that wasn't on the agenda, I didn't even know you were going to discuss that today. But that should not stop you as members of the public for bringing your concerns before the board, even when they're not on the agenda. It's just that they cannot engage with you.
That's the reason for public forum.
So a perfect example of that is at the December board meeting, when, after Mike and I were sworn in, the elected officials were then chosen so that we had a chair, a vice chair, and a treasurer, president, vice president, and a treasurer. The board president decided to talk about an item and make a decision on an item that was not even on the agenda. So I brought it up in Tuesday's meeting in January as a correction in the notes because it wasn't mentioned that way in the notes, so the notes again were wrong from the previous meeting. And afterwards, our attorney pulled me aside and she said, this really wasn't a problem with the notes, it was more of a problem with procedure. And she said, if you think there was a Brown Act violation, bring it up again and put it on a future agenda and then we'll discuss it. So I intend to do that.
Yeah, Brown Act violation is any discussion of items not on the agenda. There are several things, but that's punishable by a $10,000 fine and 6 months of jail, potentially. So when these violations come up, they need to be taken very seriously. And it's why board members need to, even as much as they would like to say something to you on an item that's not on the agenda, they have to refrain.
Mike and Cindy, everybody, something happened at the last meeting. Is this on? Yeah. At the last meeting, I was sitting approximately 3 feet away from the general manager and maybe 4 feet away from council. During the period of time when Director Souza was making the recommendation for a forensic audit at the meeting, Barbara, the council, immediately reached over and had a conversation with our general manager. Also, during the discussion, which was quite lengthy about what was going to occur, she took out a piece of white paper and started writing on it and showing it to the general manager and no one else. And she scratched some stuff out, started again, and in the meantime, she was also speaking. I don't think this is a correct attitude to take, especially when Director Souza went out at the end of his proposal for the forensic audit and for the reduction or freezing of the rates. he directly spoke to council and asked her if she had anything to say regarding this proposal. And she said nothing. But to have a conversation going on between just two people, basically it's a closed session meeting without a closed session meeting, and she works for the board, not for the general manager. But she was very deeply, emotionally drained in her face when that came up from Director Souza. And she was not a happy camper from what I observed. And then when she pulled out that white paper, they were starting to have a conversation back and forth. This is wrong, folks. I mean, if she had something to say, she should have raised her hand, which she's not shy about, and brought this up before everybody, or said we have to go to closed session. That didn't happen. So that's something that has to be stopped.
She also was doing that while Cindy was talking, so she was ignoring what Cindy was saying. And I thought it was really rude, and it went on a few times, so that's gotta stop.
Can you say point of order?
Thank you. Yes,
Point of order. Okay, that's what you say.
yes.
Point of order?
Point of order could have been said,
Uh-huh,
and it could have been pointed out
okay,
We
from,
were trying to be nice at that.
yeah,
yeah,
yes.
because it's
Right, and,
Can anybody say that, point of order?
yes,
Like out in the
yeah,
audience?
yes, but
You
when
see
you,
something going on, we can say point of order, and it'll stop it?
yes, but when you usually bring up a point of order, it's usually based on some of the parliamentary rules that this organization has chosen to follow. And we know from the December board meeting, when Carrie Fuller, the legal attorney that was there, was filling in for Barbara while she was on Christmas vacation.
In December?
At the December meeting, when a community member stood up and asked, what parliamentary rules are you following? And she said Rosenthal's, we assumed she made an error. We assumed that she meant Rosenberg's rules of order. And so when I followed up with an email to her and asked her, may I have a hard copy of the loose interpretation of the Rosenthal rules that you referred to, which I believe you meant Rosenberg rules of order, could Mike and I have a hard copy of that so we know what is expected of us based on those rules of order? And I never heard back. So I printed out a copy of that email and I handed it to Barbara at January's meeting on Tuesday. And she said she never received it. So I said, then you need to work that miscommunication out with Carrie and in your office. And I said, I'd still like a copy. And Mike and I talked to her afterwards. We said we'd still like a copy. And we weren't really satisfied, I don't think, with the answer we received. The answer we received was basically, the majority of the special districts in this area follow these types of rules. We don't follow them to the letter, because if we did, and she started giving us examples of what would happen if we did. And so basically I got a deflection and a non-answer, and we still don't have a copy. So we do the best, but if you usually bring up a point of order, it's usually because you know those Rosenberg rules of order, and you notice that one is out of sequence, it's out of order, and you're making that point. So rather than just say point of order, you need to say point of order, and then ask the question, what is the procedure for example, discussing an item that's not on the agenda and making a change in procedure because of the discussion. Things like that, and then you get an answer. And
Cindy, on a point of order, you have to raise the point of order to the president or the head of whatever body it is and wait to be recognized. At that point, once you're recognized, you state what you have. And at that point, as soon as someone says point of order, according to the rules that I go by, is the whole of the meeting and the agenda must stop until the issue raised under the point of order is settled in some manner. Nothing else can go on until that point of order is cleared up.
And Steve, good point, thank you. This is why I asked for a copy of the rules they follow. Because if everybody has a different interpretation, then we get the behavior that we've seen in the past, where somebody will bring a point of order, it's quickly discussed, and then the meeting moves on. So that may not necessarily be the right way to do things, but until we have it in writing the way we're supposed to do things, We don't know how we're supposed to do things.
Yeah, but the whole thing of it is, the whole meeting is supposed to stop until they clarify. It's not up to you to make a decision, it's up to them, powers that be, or council, to clear it up and say, under statute such and such, and not just throw out a word. Everything that they say, I want them to be able to document in their response what they're relying upon to make that statement, not just something they feel like saying.
All right, we're gonna continue on with the resolution. This is gonna be as long as our board meeting was. All right, so, the next, item that was on the consent calendar that we pulled was that AB 1600 resolution based on the 1989 bill for, disclosure of, capital facilities charges. And it's supposed to be, reviewed. Drop the mic, that's what I did. It's supposed to be reviewed every 5 years, and I believe the last time it was reviewed was 2007 or 2009, so it's been a long
Wow,
time.
that far.
So, we have 1.5 million and change, I can't see the exact numbers, you can see it. It's like 1562668, something like that.
636.
Yeah.
I don't remember it all,
Close enough.
but I knew it was 1.562, and basically that says that the money you collect from your capital facilities charges, that you have a plan for using it. If it's in excess amounts over 5 years, so every 5 years you say, all right, we have a capital improvement plan, and if we have this excess money, this is what we plan to use it for. The other thing is you don't have to spend it all. It can be used towards loans or collateral, so it's just there to say that we're gonna use it for these facility plans, and if there are no plans, then you have to make a plan for removing it out of the capital facilities charges. So that's basically what that resolution was. It was a long-needed follow-up on things that wasn't done. Then that brought up a bunch of questions about our capital improvement plan, but regardless of what's in the plan or not, we have to make that, that comment known and send that to the state, basically.
Correct. One of the reasons I pulled this item from the consent calendar is in reviewing the finances on a regular basis for the district, and then looking at this proposal by the general manager to take $1.5 million out of a reserve fund when he just raised our rates to pay for those capital improvement projects. We've heard in the past from previous boards and the general manager that they were spending money out of reserve accounts because they didn't have enough capital coming in to pay for projects. So they raised our rates, thinking we were going to pay for capital improvement projects. So why is he taking 1.5 million out of capital reserves to pay for projects if he just raised our rates? So again, it's accountability and transparency. So I wanted to make sure that the pieces were in place for him to legally do this based on the resolutions and the ordinances and the Stantec report information and things like that, which they are, so he can do this. And it was decided that he could do this. But just to let you know, the capital coming in from your rate increases right now, he's using it to pay for labor.
And going into the general fund.
It's going into the general fund.
And that
It's-
has been proven in court cases that many districts are using the same method that he's doing to do a fraudulent Prop 218 so that they can take the money that they got from the two Prop 218 increases and put it into the general fund, which is like a slush fund that they can use for anything, instead of what they actually were supposed to do and identify in the Prop 218 proposition, which they haven't done to this date.
So the general manager could use the increased capital that's coming in from your rate increases for capital improvement projects.
Yes.
He can do that. Right now, from the finances that we're seeing and the reporting that we're seeing, it's generally covering his labor, his additional labor costs for the additional positions he's hired
For admin.
for admin.
And the other reason I pulled the item was I wanted to make clear that the capital facility charges can only be used for capital improvement. So they can't just go back to the water fund without a board resolution, that's number one. Number two, I don't think it's legal, it has to be used for water development and improvements And three, to also say that we need to use the reserves first before we're charging the rate. So we brought all of that up and made it on the record.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
That they're taking 1.1 million of this fund this year, 18-19, plus $611,000 on top of it, 1.7 million for the infrastructure, and we didn't see anything, like she said, where the 700,000 is supposed to go into reserves. So we didn't have no idea where that's our rate increase money. So it's 1.7 this year.
I just wanted to clarify something for me. When you said labor, are you talking about payroll?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, okay,
the burden labor rate.
so existing employees.
Existing employees and the additional ones that he has hired in the office, the additional admin positions.
What about retirement?
Well, it's everything.
Well,
So I mean, we have retired persons.
Operations is the biggest expense that we
Right.
have in the district, and the major expenses are gonna be administrative salaries and counters.
Correct. And does everybody know what I mean when I say burden labor rate? Does anybody know what that means?
No.
Okay. A burdened labor rate on the impact to your finances, to your program, means that not only am I gonna hire Mike and pay him a salary, let's say I'm gonna pay him $65,000 a year to do a particular job, and he does that. His burdened labor rate is not $65,000 a year. It's $65,000 plus his medical, plus his dental, plus his vacation, plus CalPERS, plus all of his benefits. If he chooses to have, and we have a plan that possibly is offered to him, where he can pay a little bit more, and the company pays a little bit more because he wants to put his family on his insurance plan, cover his wife and his children as well, we might be paying a little bit more for that. So it's everything that we need to pay as an organization to cover Mike to do the job we've hired him to do. So his burden labor rate could go from 65,000 up to maybe 95 or 100,000. And it could go up even more from there depending on overhead. For example, when I worked for Department of Water Resources, my program's overhead, I would have to calculate that into my budget, so it had an impact on my budget. So what that means is, I would have to take my engineers and my scientists and figure out what I'm paying them. And in order to put their burdened labor rate into my budget so I could tell my stakeholders this is exactly how much this work is going to cost that you want this individual to do, sometimes when I include it in the overhead, and the overhead is how much of my program's portion do I have to pay for an agency to cover personnel, legal, executive, procurement, fleet management, a training center if we had it, all those pieces of an agency that it takes to run it together, to run it as a whole, my program has to pay a portion of. So the burden labor rate, what I ended up finding out is sometimes my salaries for my engineers and my scientists would sometimes double or triple. So if I'm paying an engineer $65,000 a year, his burden labor rate to cover the other pieces of the agency to my stakeholder to get work done, I'd sometimes have to double and triple his salary as a burdened labor rate. So your overhead can sometimes be in on that too. So that's why we really need more financial accountability with this district to find out what is our real overhead figures, what are our actual 12 months worth of increases that we received last year. We should be seeing those rather than just using projections. So we really do need a little bit more financial accountability.
And when you talk about burden labor rate, that's why discussions, I remember at our first town hall, people asked about consultants, why do you use consultants? And that's one of the reasons why is so you don't have the CalPERS liability and some of the other ones. So you can, if it's easier to use them when it's, depending on what the task is, it's easier to use consultants as opposed to employees. So that's always a trade-off.
Correct, because you're paying them a straight hourly wage of $140 an hour rather than vacation and exactly, vacation and sick leave and holiday and all the other benefits that go along with that overhead rate, that burdened labor rate.
What's next? So the assessment district closeout. So as even our president, Dane Waddle, said that this was something he brought up when he was on the finance committee, so that had to be at least almost 4 years ago. And I brought that up when we started, like what are all these districts, what is in them, what are we using them for, because they're just sitting in funds and they count as assets and they're kind of restricted, we can't use them. So these were all of the leftovers from loans or charges that were in each of the district, and they do need to be closed out because we have a whole bunch of funds that aren't going anywhere. But I also wanted to make the point that, like, especially with the ones that have significant amount in, if there is any work that we're still doing there, we should take it out of these funds first before just closing them out and putting into the general water fund. But
Garden Valley's not up there. Do we have no money?
No, we have a lot, we're a reserve fund right now. We have about 72,000.
yeah, you're still reserved.
Yeah, they're doing one thing with Garden Valley and saying we can't do it on the
With
other
these.
ones.
Right.
If they do it with Garden Valley, it should be universal with the other districts. This amount that we're talking about at this time, I think the cumulative is around $87,000 or $88,000, which the board is just going to say, thank you very much, everyone. We're going to put it into the general fund. And you know what happens with the general fund?
Yeah. And all these different districts pay into this money. But they overcharged Garden Valley for 4 to 5 years before they stopped charging us. And then kept the money.
The same thing you're doing with ALT sewage.
Yeah, same thing.
Correct. So what Mike and I want to see and make sure that we will see is the reserve policy was just amended. And one of the things that we wanted to have in that amended reserve policy was when we take money out of these types of accounts, we want a pedigree on where it came from and where it's going to. So we want to track these monies when they move them around. We want to know where this chunk of change came from and where it's going to, because they may not move, let's say Greenwood, they may move that 5,000, what is that, $5,600. They may move $5,600 out of Greenwood, but they may put 100 here and 100 there and 3,000 there and 200 there. If we don't track that, it's the financial accounting going forward is going to be a nightmare. So it's going to be very important that we have a pedigree on each one of these accounts and where they're going to and where and why and how. So we'll make sure we track that. Yeah.
Oh, here we go, I know exactly where you guys are going.
So then this is, I mean, it's a procedure for the board members and the general manager have to be signatories to be able to sign the checks. However, we had a board member that wasn't comfortable giving all the information to the district based on things we know in the past, and you know, she wants to make sure. So they still wanted to go ahead and vote with her being a signatory, so I had to amend the motion to take Cynthia off the signatory so everybody could sign that wanted to sign. I don't see how they were trying to make a vote when a person said they did not want to sign, so that was.
Well,
So Cindy's going to give you the cake with the hacksaw.
So when I read this agenda item, you guys, I realized that there was obligations on me to provide information to the bank for things I didn't understand.
Yeah.
There were a number of items that said, you're responsible for this, this, and this, and this, and I wasn't comfortable with knowing what this is were. So I asked for clarification. What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And I didn't get clarification to my satisfaction. And I wasn't gonna be able to sign checks and be obligated for certain things that I didn't understand. And if they're not gonna make them clear, I'm not ready to be a signatory. And if you look at the way that the proceedings took place in the board meeting when we elected officers, the former board members made it very clear that I didn't have a place in either being president, vice president, or treasurer. So they made it very clear where my position is. So if my position now suddenly means that I need to sign checks, why do I need to be a signatory on checks when there's 4 other members that are in the position and have more of the responsibility to do so? Especially if I have questions about these obligations that I may be signing that I agree to and I don't understand what they are. So I said, can I just volunteer to be not a signatory? And they couldn't answer that either. So I have a real problem with this district not having policies and procedures written down.
Do they have a list of all the policies and procedures in a written format?
No, no. How often, Steve, have we keep asking for an inactive meter policy? They still don't have one.
I'm just asking, that would be a good question to put forward to the district, that they should do an inventory of the procedures and resolutions that have been issued since day one, so they can be reviewed.
Asking for policies and procedures is something Mike and I do on a regular basis, because it comes up quite often.
And
It comes up
resolutions.
quite,
And resolutions.
correct.
That, if you remember our first board meeting, that was the first item that we asked to be put on an agenda, so it's.
But has anything happened? No.
Nope, we don't have, every meeting, we'll just have to bring it up, and every meeting, the community.
So there's no board policy manual?
No.
Oh, there's a
Yeah,
board
there
policy
is.
manual, there is.
Yeah.
There is, and we were given, and to the district's credit, we were given binders as new directors, and there are policies and procedures in there. They're not thorough and they're not complete. The president and the treasurer's in there, it doesn't even say the duties of the vice president in there, so there's gaps. It needs to be addressed, and this is another reason why I keep encouraging the general manager to use committees liberally. He could put together ad hoc committees, it doesn't have to be a big committee. It could be a committee of 4 people, and I recommended one from the community, one from the finance committee, one from the staff, and one from the board to put together a committee to just sit down and start drafting up and reviewing policies. And we have yet to persuade the general manager that that is in his best interest to do that.
But the other problem is, you know that the district has been operating on emergency fire, putting out fires for the last couple of years. So they're just doing one thing after the other. So it's gonna take time for them to get their house in order before we can even get anything to move forward. I mean, you can see all the items we're trying to get on the agenda.
Yeah.
We can't even get it put on, so we gotta try and get the biggest fights out of the way first, so.
There's still a lot of ruffled feathers that have to be smoothed out.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Wait a minute. Didn't they, I heard they purchased a draft policy manual, and all they have to do is go through it. They already have the backbone of it, and they're not using it.
And I know even during the finance committee, Rick Gillespie said they brought up one big manual, and there's a bunch of stuff, but there's a lot of policies and procedures that need to be formally put in place, so that's what we wanna do, to make sure once it's there, it's a formal procedure that was voted on by the board, that they can say, oh, this is 2017 whatever, so it's something that after Cindy and I are gone, it can't fall back to the way it was before. So we wanna make sure things are in writing and in a book and resolved, so it's carries forward for everybody.
Correct, and we want to make sure too that if we make these policy updates and these changes, that they're actually implemented and followed.
Okay.
Because you can make all these great policies and have them a book and they can collect dust on the shelf, but until you actually implement them and follow them and hold your staff accountable for following them and make sure they are implemented and followed. So.
And the other thing
We got a
with-
lot of work to do.
The other thing with this is they wanted to see if they could, to delay the vote until Cindy was ready to sign. And the other thing is I'm treasurer and I'm not a signatory yet, so I can't sign the check. So
Wow.
the longer it goes without me seeing what's going on, I mean, so that's why I'm like, I need to have the signature so I can see the check, so I can follow up and, see what's going on. So until then.
So it was just amended. They just took my name off and everybody voted it in, so we have 4 signatories now instead of 5.
Because it'll probably still take a month before we get cards still, so.
Yeah.
Can I suggest too on this, that the performance review of your general manager be tied to, one part of that should be, how well he follows policy? That's what we do in other boards, yeah.
And the public should be allowed to give their input on it, because they'll know more than what the board might want to put out. The one question or one issue that I think should be addressed with the general manager, especially with the statements that he made at the last meeting, that he's so busy that you're not going to see anything on the agenda being changed from the way it's happening, because he's just so busy. Well, I think if the agenda format was changed so that some of the things that are repetitive every month be eliminated until there's really something important. And whatever the most important item that is considered important by the public and the board be put up first. I saw people being discouraged and leaving the meeting because they put the supposedly most important thing at the end of the meeting, hoping, in my opinion, that the public will get sick and tired of it, get discouraged of coming to meetings, because they have to wait so long just to give a talk on it. So if the arrangements were made to make the agendas so that the important stuff is first, so the public can get in and get out, and whatever has to be done between the board and the staff needs to be minimized, because some of the staff are getting overtime to wait overtime. And I don't think that's a mistake either. That's not an oversight.
Yeah, that thing, I mean, they put a lot of stuff in the consent calendar so it could be passed on block, and some of the stuff that they thought would not be controversial all ended up being, so I think it's a matter of they don't understand what's,
Yeah.
No, they do
Or maybe they
understand. Don't
do.
think that they're
Well,
ignorant.
well,
Yeah.
as you can see, we're holding it to task and keeping everybody accountable, so
Good, thank you.
we're not letting anything go without shedding the light on anything, so.
And I think when it comes to policy, you know, the point about public involvement, you can work on those in an ad hoc committee.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, like on our school board, we have a board retreat once a year that's an open public meeting where we go over policy and goal setting with the, and if the public wants to attend and have input, they have an agenda, it's a public meeting, they can see what you're doing,
Right,
see how you're deliberating on it, and they can be a part of that process too.
right. Good point.
So then we had the board reports, and for those that were there, I had my 2 slides on civility and sacrifice. And then I talked about the town hall meetings and all the agencies meetings that I've been going to and attending throughout the county. So I've been going to EDQA and the Regional Water Authority and Aqua and Mountain Water one is coming up. So I'm going to all of these, keeping our small district's voice there, because everything's not cookie cutter, and if we don't have a voice, that's how you get things coming through like that tax they're trying to put on for water districts. So we'd be taxed 3 times then. We'd be taxed by the state, we'd be taxed by our property tax, and we're taxed by our rate. So that's kind of crazy when, and not only that, our water source doesn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, things aren't cookie cutter. The same with the 55 gallon, which goes down to 52, and the same with drought restrictions. So there's a lot of things actually EDQA's working on. So if your source has a specific impact, then if your drought restrictions cover that, then your whatever emergency guidelines you have set up will supersede what the state is. So if we're at a certain point and we have 18,000 acre feet in Stumpy, that's not impacting anybody else, then we go by what our acre feet is. So that would be the overall goal.
And I just let the board know in my report that I just let them know 4 items, and I listed those off, and one is the workshop, and I asked if the workshop coming up is open to the public, and they said yes, and I asked them to put that information on their website. So if you're interested in going to that workshop, that will be over in Cameron Park at the Community Service District coming up, where we're actually gonna have our contractor, VDT, go over finances for our district. And then the flyer is over here. So I just reported on a few other items, and then what I thought was interesting is the other board members didn't have anything to report. So again, you can see who the transparency is coming from.
A question on, you were just mentioning the 50 gallons per person, kind of, and like that. You know, how does a person who raises livestock get around that?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
exactly,
I have 30 cattle at home.
so that's exactly the problem. They're doing it based on, let's look at suburban, look at little households, look at apartments, and that's what it's based on, and they're not taking into account people that live in rural areas, the mountain areas, people that are at a source of origin, people that have their own water supply. So those are the things that we have to bring up to the state, that it can't just be cookie cutter, and that actually got to them, and Aqua actually worked on it, so they're actually having a plan now where our emergency may supersede what the state comes in.
And that was put on the back burner, right?
Well,
That regulation that Brown put in.
the new governor is working on a lot of stuff, but you gotta keep watching what goes through, what bills go on. I mean, it's a constant, you gotta be forever vigilant, basically. So that's why I'm trying to go to all these meetings and keep apprised of what's coming down the pipeline.
So Joe and Dave, what will happen is if they come up with an initiative like this, it generally will go out to a workshop where the community can participate and have a chance to voice their concerns and their comments. And they will, then the powers that be will take those back under consideration, and they may revise the ordinance or revise the initiative, and then they'll bring it back to another workshop. And they'll keep doing this back and forth until they get it refined down to the point where they think they're ready to go out to a public comment period. And then they'll still have to post it for 45-day public comment period, which is when, again, the community can write in their comments during that 45-day period. So there is a very detailed process that initiatives like this go through. They're not just gonna say, we want this done, boom, it's done. So we will have, as community members, quite a few opportunities to provide input and comment.
Again, I guess my question is, now let's say they've implemented the arbitrary number,
Yes.
you know, and again, I've got 30 cattle, I got a half dozen horses.
Correct.
You know, there is absolutely no way in hell I could possibly live up to that. What is my consequence?
So here's the implementation of it, so that's why it's been a slow process. They made every water district put in the gauging measuring system so they can measure how much water is going out. So basically, there will come a point when the state will ask the district, how much are you going to, is the amount of water you can release in a year, which meets the whatever gallon restriction per household is. They'll give them that number, and then if they go over that number, they'll be fined, they'll fine the district. So they said, we're not finding individuals, they'll find the district, but you know what happens when they find the district?
Yeah, shit flows downhill.
Rates go up, exactly, so.
Correct.
So indirectly, we will be fined.
But that 55 gallons is indoor use, not counting outdoor use. That's indoor use.
And Sherry's right, currently, right now, the way it's written is it's indoor use only, it's not outdoor use.
But it's treated water, so
Right.
if you're treated water and you have livestock and cattle and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, but
you're
everybody
gonna
has a
use it
yard.
more. And so,
Yeah,
how are they
yards.
arbitrarily going to determine, all right, which part of the water you're using is going to your cattle versus your household? So there's a lot of problems.
Second meter.
I understood it was per capita, which is a head. You
Yeah.
know, you got three
Right.
people, 50 gallons, 150 gallons. Do you get to count your head of cattle?
Nope, so you see, that's why I said there's a lot of problems.
Yeah.
It's the difference between two people living on a little household versus two people living on a vineyard, so.
Correct, and don't forget too, folks, that a lot of times when these initiatives pass, if there are exclusions or exemptions within the ordinance or the law, we will have to see what those exclusions and exemptions are. Sometimes there will be also mitigation set aside, there'll be mitigation measures. So for example, when the State Water Project was put in 50 years ago, that canal, as you can imagine, took a lot of different easements to get all the way from north to south. So there was these mitigation measures set aside. One of the major mitigation set-asides was the Suisun Marsh. They said, as a set-aside and as mitigation for you ripping up this land and grabbing all these easements to put this canal in to send water down south, we want you in perpetuity to maintain and take care of and to make sure that it stays there is the Suisun Marsh. So that was a set-aside. It was a mitigation measure. So there's lots of different things that can happen when bills like this or initiatives like this are introduced. You really never know how they're eventually going to end up. It just has to go through that process, and it may go through 3 or 4 reiterations. It could start out as red and turn to blue and green and yellow and end up orange. So you really don't know. We just have to make sure that we stay notified about these, we stay engaged. Mike and I will be watching these kinds of things. We're working in the committees and the organizations to keep our finger on these kinds of pulses, and we will bring you information when it's relevant. If you guys hear of something like this, please bring it forward, let us know about it, and we'll make sure we keep an eye on it. But it's going to have to get, the initiative for us to go to 55 gallons per capita at some point in time eventually. It's going to have to go through a lot of reiterations and a lot of discussions before it gets down to just that, because it doesn't fit for a rural area, and you can't have a one-size-fits-all here in California. That just doesn't work.
And then sometimes it may require some of us to go to the Capitol. So if I'm carpooling down and asking people to come, the same way that we're out there trying to get the rates decreased is the same thing we have to do on a larger scale. So you always got to be involved with the government.
Staying within the agricultural idea of this, I've noticed a lot of new vineyards going in on the divide.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, where is their water coming from? Are they doing wells? Are we tagging the wells? Do you have any information on these vineyards?
I know a lot of people are actually using wells, so that's one problem here. But the reason they're using wells is because irrigation water was too expensive. So they did the cost analysis and they're like, it's cheaper for us to do wells. The new ordinance is out now, so people are buying irrigation water, so we'll see how much is being bought. And then further on down the line, I've been going to the El Dorado County Water Agency meetings and the Ag Council meetings, and one of the things they're trying to do is expand agriculture in the county. And they're looking for grants and methods to have the state help provide ways we can increase it, because there's a difference between agriculture in our county versus the Central Valley, where ours is really related to a lot of agritourism as well, with our vineyards and Apple Hill, and a lot of small, basically small family operated farms and cattle and livestock and things like that. So it's different from like the Central Valley where you have your big garlic growers or things like that. So it's something that is not cookie cutter that.
Thank you.
And we also have there's built-in expansion places for water development. And there's been places that have been rezoned to ag, even in our district, and even on our district, if you look at the Stantec report and the current report, it shows places where they can't expand water. So I know the general manager always says there's no place for expansion, but there's a whole bunch of places.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
sphere of influence that we can grow into.
But we would need money in order to put in all of that infrastructure. So that's the thing. So unless we get a grant to help with the expansion, it would be difficult for us to do it by ourselves.
Mike and Cindy, one of the things that we need to be aware of, I believe, is that, to my knowledge, from when the water leaves Stumpy, there's at least 15 different diversion points that the district, by its own volition, can open up a valve, a gateway, or a section of ditch so that it spills into Pilot Creek, Rubicon, Canyon Creek, etc., to bypass the district's filtration plants. And if it comes up, they were just apprehended, I'll say, or discovery of dumping a good deal of water just last year before the election, right from their headquarters in Georgetown down through Illinois Canyon that goes down to Canyon Creek. Now, they're always complaining or making the statement that people are stealing water, that the evaporation and the ditches leak so much. It's my opinion that it's none of the above to any major degree. It's a matter of the district getting rid of the excess water so it doesn't go through any gauging so that they can retain their water rights. Because if they land up with a reservoir that stays 80%, and then the state's going to come along and say, well, you don't need this water, so we're going to take your water rights away. The biggest part of that, when they take the water rights away, and what you were speaking about as far as people wanting to get money for agricultural uses and improvement and what have you, what happens is after they get the money for agriculture, the state has a law that says drinking water, potable water, is a first priority of any water that a district gets. So no matter what the increases is in the infrastructure, that in a blink of an eye can be changed over to transport potable water to new subdivisions. And that will affect us all. Thank you.
Operations. So speaking of Stumpy Meadows, so on his Darrell's report, I think he had his Stumpy acres was at 16,000 acre feet, and I believe since his report and coming to the meeting, we're up to 17,000 acre feet, and there's snow on the ridge, so that's gonna, if we got rain, which we did, that'll leak in, so we're probably getting close to 18,000 at this point.
Which is good, because Stumpy's max is 20,000 acre feet.
I've been up there a few times just this year, and 2 weeks ago I went up and I noted it, and then I came back last Friday and it had come up 2 feet. So it's coming up rapidly.
Good.
And there is snow up there, and there is increased snow. I would be a bit surprised if it was full by the end of February at the latest.
Probably even before
You know,
that.
because it probably before, yeah.
Great.
And the thing was, even though we have 20,000 acre feet max, we can only use about, usable is around 12,500, so. Then also that, the state reports went in, so the monthly report showed that, the Walton plant continues to, meet all of the requirements for, drinking water. Everything's fine with Walton, and ALT is not, and that's why we're making that new plant, so.
I just had a conversation with my good friend, and we were talking about the Auburn Lake Trails plant, and just, you know, I've been here for 30 years, and just like 3 years ago, I was finally appraised of the idea that, yeah, Auburn Lake Trails is not Auburn Lake Trails' treatment plant.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
And I would venture to guess a huge portion of this populace believes the Auburn Lake Trails treatment plant is for the gated community.
Yes, they do.
So,
And that's why I want to change the name to Sweetwater Plant or
yeah,
something.
well, how about
Yeah,
that?
that'd
How
be
about,
great.
that's
So it's
what
on
I'm saying.
Sweetwater.
Plant number 1 and plant number 2, just make it plain and simple.
Right.
You know, because, again, the confusion will many times absolutely sway somebody the opposite direction, which I
That
want
was,
them to
that was
go.
the first thing they said when I joined the finance committee to the general
Let's
manager.
change that.
That's why they need
Right.
to change, yep.
Right.
I've already coined Sweetwater, and Lonnie so wants to change it to something else, so.
But you can't because of the loan, right?
It was the lease. Apparently the land is leased, and so until the lease is up, we can't change the name of it, but soon we can change the name of it. But yes, so the Auburn Lake treatment plant covers basically the bottom half of the district. It covers Cherry Acres, parts of Greenwood, parts of Auburn Lake Trails, parts of
Cool, Pilot Hill.
Pilot Hill.
Right.
So it's like half the district, and Walton is the other half. So you're right, plant 1, plant 2, and
Make it a whole lot more
Simpler.
understandable, and get you a whole lot more cooperation.
correct.
Support.
And just without, hate to bring up the controversy, but if you saw in the newspaper where someone was claiming that they would cut off Auburn Lake Trails, they would actually cut off half the district, so.
Right.
Wow.
The backlash on that would probably be a little more than they expect, so.
Do we know who owns or who is the leaseor of the property to the district at the Auburn Lake Trails treatment plant?
I have no idea,
I don't know either, that's a good question.
and I actually don't see
Because
that
if
in our
that's-
lease stuff, so it probably is something that we can change, so we could probably look into it. to
Well,
see.
the thing that I bringing up is we just put $12 million into a piece of property that if I were the leaseor, I would say, you know, when it comes time to renew,
And I
that
think
he's
they
got
probably
us
will.
by the cookies.
Yeah.
And
So that's
that,
something we could look into.
that is something that should have been brought up
Yep, do we lease that
during the
property or do
EIR.
we own it, exactly.
Right. Once the lease is up, it might be leased out, for all we know, but we'll ask. Good question. Thanks, Steve.
And if it's owned, then it might be something
Thank
unusual where they blow off stuff, and it's something that, then we could have a community input on what name do we wanna change it to.
Hey, I just mentioned that.
Yeah.
Just with my knowledge, it seems like.
Alright, so the ALT plan update, and so we're basically 94% complete. We've paid up to 9.8 million of the 10.3 million now we're up to after the changes. There's been no new change orders, and we're still on track for the earliest is March 2019 to open up, but we still have to go through all of the regulatory and SCADA and all the flow stuff still, so.
All the
I
state
think
testing.
the majority of the construction that was complete, and thanks to Gloria for being totally on track with these numbers as well.
If an emergency came up, could that Auburn Lake treat the new plant, be put online right now?
No.
Because
no.
of, we had all the scare tactics in the
Right.
past, that the old plant was gonna break down, any minute, it's held together by
Mm-hmm.
Band-Aids.
And it still could.
Oh my,
It still could, Steve, it could still have a problem and go down, but then they'd have to fix it and get it back up and running. The state will not authorize us to use this new plant until it passes all the testing that they'd like to see, including passing the drinking water standards.
oh my
So we're gonna have to flush the new filters, we're gonna have to flush the lines, we're gonna
Oh, my
flush
goodness.
the systems,
Pumps
test the
and all that stuff,
electrical,
whatever it
test
takes.
everything,
Oh.
it's gonna have to go through all the testing.
I
And if
mean, the old
they're-
one, if the old one breaks down, we'll have to pay all the money to do
repair
whatever
it.
it takes.
So this is 94% complete, it's almost there, so if it's complete here in the next couple of months, and then they start the testing, and it passes all the state's mandated testing, they'll bring it online. We might even come online early in March if they can pass all the testing, get things flushed and cleaned and cleared and passed.
And one side of relief that we have now that the rain has started is a fire was a big stressor for that plant. So if we had a fire, that was probably one of the things that could have tipped it to failing. Because actually we weren't, I mean, Darryl was wondering if we even had enough capacity to be able to put out water with a fire with just a plant, which we probably don't.
Correct. Did you know, when it comes to water treatment plants and fire issues, it's a volume issue, you guys.
Yeah.
It's a volume issue. It's usually not a pressure issue or a flow issue, it's a volume issue. You need a lot of volume, and so you could run out of water.
Well, we've got a pressure issue also.
We have that as well.
We have that as well, another thing to work on. All right,
Alright, so now the meat of the issue, so the first one that they thought was gonna be a non-controversial issue was nomination. One of the board members to the local agency formation committee, LAFCO, and there's an opening and there's 2 spots for special districts, so one is gonna be open, so they can take a nominee from directors from the special district.
so I nominated Michael because Dave Souza was already sitting on the JPIA. And one of the other board members wanted to nominate Dave, so Michael reiterated the point that Dave was gonna be a bit overloaded, needs to be spread out, so they finally agreed, we took a vote, and so Michael is gonna be our LAFCO. Good.
LAFCO is a very powerful agency, for
It
those
is.
that don't know it.
And it's a commission too that provides an awesome opportunity for Michael, and for those of us who want to attend and listen to their meetings as well, because they deal with a lot of special districts. You know, not just water, but they deal with fire, sewer, fire,
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec. So it's a great opportunity to learn what others are doing in the district, and if somebody else has a great idea and has built a better mousetrap, and we could do the same thing, we could learn. This is a great learning opportunity.
But it is a special election, so it's another election to go through, so.
This is something that we're gonna vote on, or the board votes on?
The board voted on it.
Oh,
And
so
did
he's the man.
And did nominate Michael to actually hold that position to represent the water district on the commission.
But
What
the
was the
commission
vote?
is now gonna vote.
Correct.
Right, he's
Yeah.
not on it yet, he's just nominated.
Correct. And there's 2 steps to that process, David.
What was the vote for Michael? What was it?
4-1.
4-1?
No, it actually went 5.
5-0.
Once Dave Halpin, once I mentioned the fact that when they wanted, Dave Souza, I mentioned the fact that he's on Aqua already, and he's gonna be on all of the nominated positions, then
Right.
Halpin seconded the motion for me, and that passed.
Yeah, it was interesting that they were all swaying toward Dave Souza because he knows everybody. That's what they were saying, because he knows everybody there. And then you flipped it with that one sentence, it turned around and they picked you.
Because we shouldn't have one board member doing everything. I mean, even if it was in reverse, I don't want to be the one covering everything. We need to spread it out so every board member can have the opportunity to go to stuff. And plus, we have, that's the way you have representation, where everybody's doing, something that they can bring back to the district.
And it makes sense.
Okay, on to everybody's favorite subject, the rate increase freeze.
So the biggest thing I have to say is the next part that'll come up. Community input was the key. So without, having everybody have their say and their comments, that made a big difference, especially having all the letters from, those irrigation customers, and especially Penobscot, when they said, oh, irrigation didn't go down that much, and we were down about 60,000 from what they projected we were gonna collect in irrigation, because people cut down their irrigation, and Penobscot went from 25 minus inches to, what was it, 10? 10. 15 minus inches they cut down, so that was significant. And over that last year, with the first rate increase, we lost 54 minus inches in irrigation.
So if you think about that impact, we've all seen it. People are not filling their ponds, they're having trouble watering cattle, having trouble watering in vineyards, we're not getting the fire breaks.
Gardens.
The gardens are gone. There's just a lot of people that are not using the water, and we've all seen it. The trees are stressed, my trees, my orchard are stressed.
Has the birthday nurseries
And-
cut back on theirs?
Everybody is concerned, and the comment we heard over and over and over again is, we don't wanna be Santa Rosa, we don't wanna be Paradise. And it could easily happen here. So reduce the cost of the irrigation, let us start irrigating, stop letting it go out the end of the ditch and just being wasted. Let's lower the price, let's get it out on the divide where we can get green again. And reduce the fire breaks and fill our ponds. And so those community input comments were profound. It really did make a difference.
We have two small businesses that said, 2 more years is about it. After that, the water's too much for them to run their business, and they'll have to cut back. That's the Christmas Tree Farm and Ross and a couple of small people that go to do the farmer's market, so.
Need the mic.
Gotta lean in on the mic.
Close to the mic.
For the farmer's markets, a lot of people that get irrigation water for the farmer's markets, they'll have to stop selling in 2 years, and the Christmas Tree Farm, so there was a lot of impact there. And on the treated water side, the Running was having a lot of issues as well. And I said for us, treated water isn't gonna see the same impacts for another 3 years, then we're gonna be where irrigation is, and then that's gonna be the same side on treated. And when that happens, that's gonna be significant with a cutback in treated and irrigation water.
Correct. So we did have a pretty robust discussion between the board members and the community back and forth on this issue. And what the motion that was finally made, and the decision that was finally made, was to freeze the rate increase for 12 months to direct, and we directed the general manager to go back and take a look at, with the assistance of the finance committee and possibly a community ad hoc committee, to go back and take a look at what it would cost and what it would take to do a forensic audit. And at the same time, look at some calculations at what the rates could be adjusted to, whether up or down, what the rates could be adjusted to in the interim.
Well, they can't go
So,
up.
Yeah, they can't go
Yeah,
up, up
yeah,
and
go
down.
down.
okay, obviously they can't go up without other things coming into place, but they could bring back recommendations based on what they found, that in order for them to meet the needs, they would have to go up. So whether they are adjusted up or down, are going to bring back that information to the board. So that's what the motion was, and it passed 4-1. So we froze the rates at the current 2018 rates. You should see that adjustment on your next bill. So what I want to do is I want to take my bill that I just got for November, December, I paid that, but when I get the next one, I want to compare the two and see how much I dropped my rate by freezing it, because it would have gone up, not down. It didn't, so that difference is going to be what I lowered my rate to based on this freeze. So Mike and I just filled 2 campaigns. We lowered the rates and we froze the rates until we do an audit. Now, I want to let you know that a forensic audit, the word forensic assumes, in normal accounting languages and the types of audits that can be done, forensic assumes fraud. Okay, I'm not willing to be one that will say this district committed fraud until I see facts. So I don't know that we necessarily want a forensic audit. We may want a financial audit. There's other types of audits. There's construction audits, there's compliance audits, there's all kinds of different types of audits. What we probably should recommend is doing a tailored financial audit to look at just the 218. So we get caught up in semantics, but the gist is to let you know that we did vote 4-1 to freeze the rates for no more than 12 months, so that we have time to go back and look at what it would cost to do an audit, what it would take to do an audit, and at the same time have them calculate back us some information, bring back some recommendations on how rates might be adjusted.
What was the one vote against the rate freeze? Who voted?
Dave Wadley.
President.
Huh?
The president,
Dane Wadley?
correct?
You were there.
I know, I won't.
You said that you directed the general manager to do this,
Correct.
and, you know, and then you threw in that, an ad hoc committee would, maybe be employed, not offer that'd be the thing to do, because, you know, the fox in charge of the chicken coop, the way I'm looking at it, because to my understanding, he and, Lanuso were the ones who were really pushing on this need for this increase and the numbers that were offered and used and whatnot, and now you're gonna hand it to him and say, go check and see if your numbers are correct.
Oh, okay.
You follow me?
Yes, Dave, but let me correct you.
Independent.
Let me correct you. So when the general manager goes out and looks into what it would take to do a forensic audit and what it would cost, he's gonna bring that information back to the board. And then the board's gonna have a discussion on whether we choose to move forward in doing a type of audit, what type of audit, when and why and how and by who. So if we do an independent audit, my recommendation would be done with somebody with fresh eyes, not VDT, somebody with fresh eyes. We bring in a brand new, neutral, unbiased CPA, accounting firm, whoever has the qualifications and meets the requirements on the RFP, the request for proposal that would have to go out to bid. We'll get several, I'm sure, organizations back bidding on that to do this kind of work for us. So there's steps going forward, but it was asked the way it was asked so that it would not be the general manager or any staff doing the audit. They're just gonna scope out what it would take and what it costs to do one. And then we recommend that it could be done by an independent auditor.
I got it now.
Got it?
Yeah, great.
I want to applaud you for sticking with it, because in the beginning it seemed very, like there was a lot of opposition. It seemed all very negative, and I was getting worried whether we were going to get there. But you kept at it, and kept at it, and I could sense the room, you know, adding to it, the audience turned it around. So it started making sense, and if we don't trust what's been going on so far, this was a way to restore the trust. It doesn't even matter the outcome in a sense, because it's more about using the proper facts to get where we did and make it right. And it's not, you know, a victory to come out saying, see, we told you so. It's just let us see the truth and go from there. And you both worked so hard to make it happen. And I was thrilled at the end of the meeting that it did happen. Dave Wadley is trusting what was handed to him. Wasn't willing to look at the facts again, and I'm glad it'll be done independently. We can't have the same people presenting the figures again. So thank you very much.
Dane Wadley won't listen to us.
No.
He's got closed ears.
Well, and I have to hand it to Dave Halperin. Dave Halperin is very methodical, very reasonable. He listened, and you could hear him sway one way, and you could hear him vote the other.
Yeah.
So he is just a very rational, practical person, and I think that it was the community and the community input that was able to persuade him to change his mind. And I gotta hand it to Dave Souza. Dave Souza said what we all want. He said, that's it, I want the truth. I want the truth.
He's tired of it, and
He's a nip it in the butt kind of guy, and he wants to get to the end of it. He doesn't want this to drag on, nobody does. And in fact, it was him who said, we don't need to go out more than 12 months. So
He wanted it to be 2 years, but I made it
But he was
12
setting
months
time limits.
to kind of help Dave come along, because even if you agree with the general manager's numbers, but as I pointed out at the finance committee and at the beginning, when you don't use the projected numbers, you're actually everything is exponential. So where we are in year 2 is not where we should be in year 1. So you're taking where we were before the rate study and projecting it where we already know we collected that revenue. But I stopped us at a point where we're not even in the red, where the line doesn't even decrease, where the money that we're losing now from it doesn't impact us at all because it isn't revenue loss, it was revenue gain going towards reserves. It's even less than the amount that's supposed to be transferred to reserves, which is $652,000 based on budget. So, I mean, it's extra and above and.
Mike and Cindy,
Correct.
I can understand your phraseology about not agreeing on something that might have gone wrong or been unlawful with the district on a forensic. We might have read the same definition of a forensic audit off of the same papers, I don't know for sure. But I checked into it since the meeting, and I've been told that you can do a forensic and you can make your own type of a forensic investigation. And I am meeting tomorrow with someone that's in the know to flesh that out so that in fact we can make and present to you or to the district a acceptable forensic audit that should be done, because the only way we're going to get down to the bottom is a forensic audit. I read all the definitions on it, and none of them address, as I read, I didn't do a full analysis of it, but if we can phrase a forensic audit that is not as accusatory as I saw the definition, I still think that's the way to go on it. And again, I'll be meeting on it with people that I've done already, and I'll be bringing that back, because I personally, from documents I've received from the district, can say that things have been done by the general manager in the last year that I have written documentation of illegal activities. Thank you.
Another point I want to make too, in the discussions that we had surrounding this topic, is that we did hear from legal that the decision or the next court date would be in April. And so I pointed out that timing could be such that if we do this audit and we get the information back, it might be around the same time frame as we hear from the courts, one way or the other. And depending on the way the courts decide, we could possibly have completed the first step in the next rate increase that we would need if we were told to go back and do the rate increase over again. So it's not going to, I don't think, be a disadvantage to the community and the district to go back and look at this audit and do this work. It would answer a lot of questions. It would meet the requests from the voters, and it would help us make that next step when we get to the point where we're ready to do another 218. So it did go through, and I'm glad to see that it did, and I'm satisfied with the 4-to-1 vote, and I think this board is gelling together as a team. We're moving forward, and I think we're ready to do some really good stuff for the community.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns was, why don't we just wait until after litigation? And that's why I asked, when does the irrigation need to put in their contracts? Because they want to know how much it's going to cost to determine how much water they're going to take. So if it's going to be higher, they're going to take less. So that's, that was a big impact.
And there is always the consideration too that the courts may decide, and then the appeal process could take effect, and then the court case could drag on longer. So I wasn't comfortable waiting until that court case was completely resolved before we did anything about freezing rates. So.
Mike and
Okay,
Cindy, have you put on your list of things for the general manager to address the page 15 on the rate study that says, as I read it, that they need to be doing a rate study right now?
Because of the caddy grant, is that right?
That's correct. That's $700,000 that we know about.
It's technically in the capital improvement plan.
Correct, it is. It's technically a capital improvement plan.
But this
yes.
happened before your capital improvement plan that you're speaking about came into effect.
No, it's in the RCAC study, I believe.
It is in the RCA, but what I'm saying is that was done back in October of 2017, I think, when it first started.
Correct, and it is something that I've spoken to the general manager about, and I am meeting him again with him on Monday,
Okay.
so, yes.
Yeah, that's, in other words, if there's a need for a rate study right now, by their own words and their own approval of that rate study, something's wrong. And the thing that's scarier, not only for this, but they're going ahead, GDPUD is going ahead at this time with another Prop 218 using similar numbers on the Auburn Lake Trail sewage issue. They're doing 218, and the only numbers that they're going to own up to are the numbers that they have now, which I think many of us are reasonably sure are very inaccurate. And especially when they've got over $1 million sitting in the bank that belongs to ALT members now.
Were you at that finance committee where they went over the first rate study for the wastewater zone?
No.
Yes.
Those that were, we brought up a lot of the numbers and issues that could be modified, and I actually took out like 50,000 that was spread over, that was on every 5 years. So I mean, we haven't seen the modified, updated one yet, so I suggest that everybody go to that January 16th, it's next Wednesday, at the Auburn Lake Trails Barn Loft, and see what the new, what revisions they have done.
It's at 6 p.m.
And all you need to do is stop at the Auburn Lake Trails Gatehouse and tell them that you want to go to the meeting, and they'll allow you. So there's no such thing that you got to call up ahead of time, this, that, and the
Or
other
be
thing.
called in by somebody.
What time?
6 p.m.
And for anybody that doesn't know where the barn loft is, when you come into the first gate, you go make the first left, and you'll pass in front of a building called the gallery, but go back farther left to a barn loft that's over stables, where the horses are, and it's up there.
So in our description of what we do as board members, it states that we need to provide research to the general manager to help us decide on items in the agenda. But when you're in a finance committee meeting on a Friday and they put out the agenda while you're in that meeting, that means you're gonna see it at 5 or 6 o'clock when you get home, and you have to go through it that whole weekend, which means Monday you'll have to direct the GM to give all this input for a Tuesday meeting. So I said there's a problem with the notification of that. We need at least a draft of the items. They don't have to do a full agenda, at least 10 to 12 days minimum before, the meeting. And especially with items that I asked to be on the agenda and they weren't on, and I had no clue if they were gonna be on or what we asked was gonna be on until the agenda came up. They should notify you, oh, this item wasn't put on and why, and when it's gonna be put on again, or this item was put on and now you can start discussing and what needs to be on it, because I didn't know if the rate freeze was gonna be on or not, but I still had to start going and trying to get information that we needed to be presented, and a lot of stuff I gave couldn't be shared because he said it was deliberating, and because it wasn't on the agenda, I couldn't push to share it until the Friday, so that was a huge problem.
It was a huge problem, and I emailed the board president a few days before Friday when the agenda was to be put out and requested to see a copy of the draft agenda, and I was told that he didn't have one to provide, that I would get it on Friday with everybody else per the Brown Act. So, again, this is another reason why, to be prepared, and so that you can be prepared too, we need to see the draft agenda well before the meeting, so we have time to prepare. Or we have time to ask, why aren't our items on the agenda that we requested during the previous meeting?
And I say, over the last year or so, I never brought this up to the board, but I did to the general manager. There are a lot of things left off the agenda, like the financial packet twice, there's cash statements that the board got that the public didn't get. And I even told him by 2 o'clock on Friday, he emailed the management analyst, and she didn't give it to me until 10 o'clock Monday. And you're supposed to have it 72 hours ahead. So there's a lot of things they've done in the last year. I just didn't make it public because I didn't want to get screamed at by the president.
And the difference is there's, new board members here and we're kind of doing things by the book and letting them know things are changing. So that's why I'm bringing items to them, especially I also mentioned, the public can ask for items to be on the agenda. And they may put it on or may not, but if he chooses to not put it on, he needs to bring that to the next board meeting and say, these were the items the public asked to put on and they're not on the agenda. And another board member can decide, oh, that's an item I think we should talk about, and we can request to put it on. So that's the procedure. So if you send him an item and it's not put on the agenda and it's not brought up at the meeting, then you need to bring it up. I brought up this item and why aren't we mentioning why it's on or not on? It's all about transparency. And then, as we talked about financial reports, that was one of the things, as the new treasurer, now I'm treasurer, I said, we need to see what kind of reports we want on our meeting to kind of reflect the kind of things we're talking about, like the transfers in and out of funds and actually having that pathway. All right, we closed down Greenwood. Did all of it go into the water fund, or did they try to put 100 here, 500 here exactly? And they basically said carte blanche to come up with whatever kind of template I wanted to use and provide it to them. So pretty much it's not an individual thing. I asked all the board members to give input and then I'll go in. So we can try and shape it the way we want to make it as transparent as possible.
Correct. We really do need to add more information to our financial reports. You probably haven't noticed, but several of us have, that the ALT, water treatment plant accounting, is not in our financial reports.
Never seen a budget.
We've never seen a budget for it. Okay? And that's a $12.5 million project with 5 change orders.
Yeah, you just see the in and out grand totals.
Correct. And they don't even show us the account balances or the summaries for the Wells Fargo account that the money is sitting in, even though they're charging us, an assessment fee.
And
So-
we have 2 Wells Fargo's accounts that we didn't know we had 2.
Right.
So they're not showing us all the monies in, the balances and all the monies out. They, this month, for some reason, we don't know why, took off the check descriptions. Well, sometimes when the check information is an acronym and you're trying to figure out what that is and it's quite a sum of money, it would be nice if the check descriptions were still there so we could understand rather than ask lots of questions about what's this check for, what's that check for, what's this check for, what's that check for. Some of them are quite large in sums of money, and so you would like to know. So we asked to have the descriptions put back onto the checks. The other thing we'd like is the financial reporting is on the consent calendar, and the consent calendar is supposed to have items on it that you can basically just rubber stamp and move right through. They shouldn't be controversial. And a lot of items on the consent calendars are controversial. We pull them off because we have questions. So we really need to relook about what we want in these financial reports, and it's a good opportunity for us to hear from you what you'd like to see, and then we'll put it in this template that we're going to be building that we're going to pass forward to the general manager for consideration.
Cindy, can they not photograph, copy the front and back of the checks after they're returned?
I'm sure that there's lots of things they could do. Whether
Well,
they
you're asking
take the time.
for suggestions because
Right.
when I was in business big time, I was able to take checks made out to one of my corporations and take that money and go to the bank and sign my name on the back of the check, or not even sign my name on the back of the check, and my bank would pay me for it, and it's not illegal.
So
But this way we would have an idea as to where it went and who actually cashed the check. So that's a recommendation that I wish that you would put onto the questions for the general manager.
We certainly will, and I'll be glad to jot that down, Stephen. And there's a lot of things I'm sure that could be done. and especially now with the banking and the way the banking has evolved, I mean, a lot of you probably do what I do. You go now and you can take pictures and you can make mobile deposits from your phone, or you can go to the ATM and you can actually ask for a printout of the copy, the front and the back of the check on your receipt. So banking has changed a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot of features that may be available to them. We just have to figure out what we'd like to see in our reports and put that into this recommendation to the general manager.
Or at least have available.
Yeah, well, Eldorado Savings does do that. They just have to request it from them. That's where a bank account is.
See, what I don't see is our general manager making these suggestions.
No.
It's my own personal opinion that the general manager is doing the work for his district, not our district. And especially when I saw him talking with Barbara in regards to the rate freeze, deeply upset. Thank you.
Anyone else?
We talked about the agenda.
Oh, yeah, my stuff. Yes, there was items that I asked to be on from the December meeting on the January agenda, and they didn't show up, so I'd like to make sure that I just reiterated them again and asked how we go about ensuring that when we ask for an item to be on the agenda, it actually gets on the agenda, and if it does not, we understand why it did not. So we still need to cover some of that information, because I'm still not satisfied as to why some of the stuff doesn't show up. I think it's very important, again, like I mentioned previously, we get the finance committee topic on the next agenda, discuss that. I'd like to revise the mission statement and add in the word transparency, and our mission statement does really need a little bit of work. And I'd like the advanced notifications on the agenda, the draft agendas. I think we need to be well informed ahead of time what's going to be on there, so that we can ask, why was this not put on? Why was this put on? And I really don't want to hear from board members that it's because of a timing issue and they don't like the fact that the meetings are going on too long. If they have other priorities, then they need to make other decisions. We're here to do the business of the people for the good of the agency and move the business forward. And we're not going to do that if we don't get our items on the agenda.
The general manager had no problem whatsoever running special meeting after special meeting after special meeting before you guys got onto the board. So I don't think it's a matter of him not being able to do it. I think it's a matter of him not wanting to do it or being directed somehow not to do it.
We're gonna go ahead and show this video since time is running here. It shows.
Yeah, I gotta run pretty quick.
We might have to come back and do it next time.
I'm not.
Is it going to run?
I can pull it up right there. Well, anyway, we did get the rate freeze. I'll have to take it off the slideshow to run it. But any questions before I go to that, since we have about 30 minutes?
I have some. I can see them.
Do you want to turn the lights back on, or?
Oh, I think that'd be great.
Outside of it.
Let there be light.
Is this a break or what? Okay, I have questions that are coming from ALT.
Okay.
There was a complaint about postcards that we get. I usually get one in March that says that we're going to have a septic inspection. And it says to keep your dogs locked up and your gates open. So this man was complaining that there was no specific date on the postcard about when someone is coming out to check their septic. So how long is he supposed to keep his dogs locked up and his gates open? I have gotten those postcards like in March and not had an inspection until November. So this is something that needs to be fixed. One year they didn't even come out and inspect, and I had to get on them about that. That took a lot of work going down to the office. There's some talk about pressure regulators, and this came up at the ALT board meeting on Wednesday. that it's our responsibility to have a pressure regulator put on our property. I don't know where it attaches or what it looks like, but I've never heard about this before, and the person talking about it said they cost about $60, and that when he checked with GPUD, it's not of their doing. And so I want to know more about what is that all about. Plus, I heard at the last district meeting that there is no check on the pressure in the fire hydrants. And was it Cherie, did you tell me that GPUD has known about it since 2002? And so I want to know what that's all about.
It's in the castle.
I know on the, for some people, there's the line that goes up to the tank, which sends the water back. That water comes directly from the plant, and a lot of people who are on that line are getting, anytime it's getting pumped up, will get over 100 PSI of water in. So I know the people that are on that route will need a pressure regulator, or else they'll get blown out.
So not everybody needs one?
I'm not sure if it's everybody. I know the people there definitely need one, and depending on where you are with the, because everything's gravity flow, so the closer you are, the higher pressure are. If you're like me at the end where we have no pressure, then it's a different story. Adam actually did they flushed and measured the pressure of all the hydrants. So if you know if you give me the address of the hydrants, I can check and see if it was done, because with the check, I actually got to check the 2 hydrants in our area, because that was one of the complaints we had, and people were like, how can we have no pressure? And finally I was able to find out that our hydrants are below the standard that you need 4 gallons per minute, and we're at a maximum of 30 PSI is what we get at most.
So when is that done?
It was done already over the summer, so if you give me your address, I'll have them pull the hydrant.
Okay, because they said they were going to flush these hydrants.
They were all flushed and all checked, and
I
you
don't
might be able
believe
to
mine
look it
was
up.
flushed.
You might be able to look it up online, because they actually put that in the GPS study, and so you could put in your address and have the hydrant stuff, but it doesn't give a lot of information. So if you give me the address where your hydrant's near, I can have Adam get you the full numbers.
You may need this sorry, Steve. You may need this information, because what we're hearing from some customers, and I think Michael and I were talking about this, is it may have an impact on your fire insurance, your homeowner's insurance.
That's what I was gonna ask. I remember I brought that up at the board meeting, and because my insurance adjuster was saying how the premiums are higher on Autumn Lake trails, and that probably explains it. The pressure's too low.
If that's the case, then there's things that we have to change in our 5-year capital improvement plan. So one of the things is that pipe dream, which is really not a pipe dream, we're gonna need it one day, is the North American River Fork pumping station, which is $100,000 in there. But in order for us to do that, it's gonna take a study and a whole bunch of stuff and CEQA. And then once we get that pumping plant, that's stage 1, then we'd have to build pipes to go all the way up from the river to Cool to maybe Overlay Trail. Then we don't have a tank to hold that water too, so we need a tank. So another capital improvement plan the next time might be to put pressure pumps so that all of our low-end hydrants get up to the gallons per minute that they require. That's why they're supposed to be different color coded. So on the actual study, they're color coded. So even though yours is red, it may be yellow or green based on what the actual outflow is. So.
When ALT treatment goes online, is that going to make any difference in the water pressure?
Because it's all done the same way. The pressure is pumped up to the tank, and the tank flows down gravity-wise. It's gravity fed. So at certain places, they have pumping stations to help the water go, but I don't think they have any on our back end. And it shows by looking at the flow of the hydrants that I started looking into.
But Mike, you did bring up a good point. When the ALT plant comes online, some of the changes we will see that I don't think a lot of people have thought a lot about is how much more is it going to cost us, because we're going to spend a lot more on PG&E to run that plant, a lot more electricity to run that plant. That's one thing we have to think about. The other thing we have to think about too is if we put in the new meters eventually, the smart meters, they're gonna be a lot more accurate and our rates may go up.
Yeah, but I brought that up. I mean, your rates
Because
won't
you're gonna-
go up by 218, but just because, let's say it's reading that you're getting
More
80%
accurately.
of the water and now you get 100%, so there's gonna be a 20% increase just based on the amount that it's picking up.
Correct, so.
That's why I asked why they didn't include solar.
And
Yeah.
that was one of the plans that,
Yeah.
so when you're looking for grants and stuff, and one of the things to do is your water leakage and water loss, so, plan that is inclusive of everything, including solar, water meters, and I'm trying to come up with a lot of, different items that I can go over with staff, and I'll send the USDA grant in and see what we can get, so for grants like that, you wanna start at the low end of 10 million, so it covers as many things as you can put in, and that'll also have the exact thing that, Steve Pro is talking about all the time. Once you get a grant like that in, that automatically sets in a new 218, because now that's, your rates are being subsidized with this grant, and a lot of stuff will go down because that just automatically comes out of the capital improvement, so.
Carolyn, did you have any more questions?
The
Um,
paper that I have here, questions from Director Saunders, on number 5, there's a statement here, it says, does our water district receive any revenues from the Canyon Creek hydroelectric plant? That answer is not included in the reply. There's no reply to the.
Did he not answer that?
He answered that they have 2 other hydro plants.
No.
Yeah, he didn't answer
The
that.
question
Yeah, I know what you're
is,
asking.
does it receive any revenues from the Canyon Creek hydroelectric plant?
Yeah, he didn't answer that.
He doesn't answer. What he does answer is that there are 2 hydroelectric plants referred to, blah, blah, blah. These hydro plants are owned and operated by a third party. And the district receives revenues through agreements with the third party in a financial agreement 2017 and 2018. The district received $78,590 through this agreement. These agreements expire in 2028 and 2029. The problem I have with that statement is we are receiving, I think, only 10% of the amount of money that those plants make. And if that's correct, we're giving away all of that money, plus we're having to buy electricity from PG&E or whoever to run our system. I think that with a little bit of investigation, if we got the contracts, we could find out exactly what's in them and examine them and see if there's a way to cancel those contracts and bring them back under the umbrella of GDPUD. And if the rates are correct, we're talking millions of dollars coming back in that right now we're giving away to a third party.
Well, when the contracts expire, it goes back to GPUD.
Excuse me, Director. When this same plant, and it is the same plant, it's just been refurbished after the first time they said that. They took the same plant, they sent it out, got it refurbished, even though the district was supposed to receive the same equipment, or basically the same equipment, after the first 20 years. So somehow something isn't correct here.
Yeah, because we brought those contracts up. Cindy and I went to his office and talked to him about the hydroelectric contract specifically.
But the thing that's important is when we discovered that the water was coming out of Georgetown Divide offices and going down Illinois Creek.
Yeah, that's why you asked about the Canyon Creek one.
Well, not only that, it's the representative from the districts, I don't know who stated it, but they said they kept the water running so they could make money off of the hydro plants upstream. In other words, they kept running the water so that they could make hydro money for the district, supposedly. The only problem is that the hydro plants can only receive water from the district in the normal course of their everyday activities. So if we're not using 100,000 gallons a day, and we're only using 25,000 gallons a day, that means someone made a decision to put another 75,000 gallons of water so that the hydro works to benefit a individual or a company. Third party or fourth party. And the Canyon Creek, what I'm still looking into, I just haven't had time, because a lot of the water that's dumped from the GDPUD system runs downhill or downstream and feeds the Canyon Creek Hydro Project that has been managed, operated, or monitored by members of the GDPUD staff for many, many years. It's all in writing.
That's privately owned.
Yeah, it can be privately owned, but it's under FERC. And under FERC, I've sent an inquiry into FERC, Federal Energy Management Commission. The FERC documents check the amount of electricity that was produced by the Canyon Creek hydro plant, and they asked, where did you get all of the water to make this electricity? There's not that much water that you can get from Canyon Creek. And the operator at that time says, well, the only place is GDPUD. And that's in writing in FERC documents. And this was 10, 15 years ago. So we're giving away an awful lot of money. Besides that, we, as the district, are doing an awful lot of maintenance and checking on these plants because it's not much. It's just a part of when we drive by. We just stop by and take a look at it and check this and that as a part of our regular operations. But we're not charging the operator as far as I know. It's just a good old boys type of situation, and I think it's illegal from square one. Thank you.
I know, Steve, that when the agreements expire, the leases expire, and the plants become back the property of GPUD, we will then have the obligation to operate those and maintain those. So there will be some costs going in, but the benefits coming out could be such that we are thinking.
The original contract said the same thing, only we didn't get the equipment.
So,
There was a 20-year contract before this one that said the same exact thing, and we didn't get the equipment. But the same equipment that GPUD was supposed to receive after 20 years was refurbished, and then a new contract was written between GPUD and whoever.
right.
So you can't have it both ways, saying, like now you're saying 20 years from now, whenever this goes away, I understand the reasoning, but if somebody doesn't know, like I know, what happened before, you can accept it, but not after what I know and other people know.
Well, we'll have to definitely cross that bridge when we come to it, but we've got a ways to go since one came on in 2007 and the other one 2008.
Well,
We've got 20 years from that.
get the
We've got
contact,
another, 8 to 10 years to go on each one of those. So we've got 8 to 10 years to figure out how we're going to take these on and if we're going to take them on, and how we're going to operate them, how we're going to manage them, and how we're going to pay for them.
as soon as FERC gets back to me, I will be filing the complaint with what I know now, irregardless of what GDPUD knows. And I don't have any qualms with everyone knowing about it. I mean, if someone's reaching into my pocket and stealing the money, in my opinion, there's something wrong. And FERC doesn't play that game.
Please make sure you take lemons home with you. They're
And
from,
they're good.
yeah, they are. They're, what are they called? Meyer lemons, and they're from the Freem family, an old family off of Wise Road in Penryn.
Thank you.
Wait, we got one more. Hold on.
And if you want the lavender that's on the table, have at it.
Okay.
I gotta run. I wanted to say thank you to the community. You guys are awesome. You've done a great job getting this where we're at today. And thank you too for all that you've done. done. You're doing awesome. And it's transparency, it's honesty and civility. The civility is huge. We ain't got no, we didn't have civility, and we're having it now, and that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm out of here.
Yes,
There
thank
have
you.
never been meetings like this, in my knowledge, in 27 years.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
I have some facts. Anybody want to?
Thank you all for coming. As I said, there's a list, I think Dave's got it over there. If you're interested in finding out more about my campaign, please put your name down on the list.